My husband's family knew for months he was cheating with my rich boss and hid it from me. At my 39th birthday party, when I called them out, they told me to grow up and accept their relationship. His mom even said, "Don't be selfish, they deserve to be happy." I just smiled, nodded, and gave them an envelope. Minutes later, he was yelling, begging me to take him back, his eyes glued to what was inside. I still remember the chill that snaked up my spine when my husband's family, at my own 39th birthday party, urged me to simply be mature and accept that he was having an affair with my wealthy boss. Then his mother, Eleanor, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't be selfish. They deserve happiness." Can you believe that? They thought they had me cornered, but little did they know, I'd been planning my own kind of party, one where their happiness would be the first casualty. That night, after I calmly smiled, agreed, and handed them an envelope, my husband, Cody, was screaming, begging me to take it back. His eyes were locked on the contents, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. But the real story, the one they never saw coming, began weeks earlier. It started in Anastasia Blackwood's private office. Not a Meridian Enterprises meeting, not a regular day. It was Cody, his parents Eleanor and William, and even his sister Patricia, all there. My boss, Anastasia, sat at the head of the table like she already belonged with them, like she was part of the family I had married into. Eleanor spoke first, her voice trying to sound professional. "Sierra, we wanted to talk to you about restructuring opportunities." I stood frozen in the doorway, her words just sounds, while my brain struggled to process what I was truly seeing. Cody's hand resting casually on Anastasia's shoulder, his wedding ring catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Restructuring?" I heard myself echo, my voice feeling foreign. William cleared his throat. "Your position at Meridian. Anastasia has some ideas about your future here." That's when I saw them, legal documents spread across the mahogany table, Anastasia's signature already on them. I remember the exact time, 3 p.m. Her assistant had called it urgent, no details, just get to the executive floor, now. The elevator ride up 32 floors had felt routine, normal. I'd made that journey hundreds of times in my 5 years at Meridian, usually carrying reports about risk assessment or regulatory violations. But walking into that room, seeing them all there, changed everything I thought I knew about my life. "Sit down, Sierra," Anastasia said, her voice a familiar, cold tone she used when delivering bad news about client portfolios. She wore the crimson Chanel suit I'd complimented her on last month, the one she said made her feel powerful during difficult negotiations. I stayed standing, my legs disconnected from my body, yet somehow holding me upright. The table between us might as well have been an ocean. Cody hadn't looked at me once, his eyes fixed past my shoulder, the way he did when calculating market risks he didn't want to acknowledge. "This is highly irregular," I managed to say, my voice raspy. "Whatever restructuring Meridian is considering should go through proper channels. HR should be present." Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clutching her designer handbag like a life preserver. I noticed the carefully applied concealer under her eyes, the same brand she'd borrowed from me after her last breakup. She'd been crying recently. "This isn't exactly a standard corporate restructuring," William cut in, straightening his tie, his Harvard class ring glinting in the afternoon light. "It's more of a family discussion that happens to have professional implications." Family discussion, the words hung in the air, a poisonous accusation. I looked at each of them, these people I'd shared 12 years of holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners with. Eleanor wouldn't meet my eyes, absorbed by her phone, text messages reflecting on the screen. Patricia kept opening and closing her mouth, as if trying to speak, but couldn't find the words. And Cody, my husband, the man who promised to love and honor me, sat there like a stranger wearing a familiar face. "What kind of family discussion requires my boss's presence?" I asked, though a sickening part of me already knew. The late nights Cody had been working. The unexpected business trips that coincided suspiciously with Anastasia's travel schedule. The way Eleanor had started asking about my overtime and compliance review trips with unusual interest. Anastasia leaned back in her chair, the same one where she'd told me 6 months ago I was being promoted to senior compliance director, that my integrity and attention to detail made me invaluable. That she saw me as more than an employee, as someone she was grooming for partnership. "Sierra, you're an intelligent woman," she began, using her smooth, clinical voice reserved for complex financial instruments. "Surely you've noticed that the dynamics in your marriage have been evolving." Evolving, what a clinical, cold word for betrayal. And they'd all been aware of this evolution. I looked at Eleanor, the woman who'd taught me her secret Thanksgiving stuffing recipe, who'd held my hand at my father's funeral last year. Eleanor finally looked up from her phone, a weak, placating expression on her face. "We didn't want to hurt you unnecessarily. Some things resolve themselves naturally if given time and space." Time and space. I repeated, my voice tight. "Is that what you call secret meetings in my boss's office?" The legal documents drew my attention again. I could make out enough text to understand their purpose: separation agreements, asset division worksheets. Even what looked like a draft resignation letter from my position at Meridian, typed on company letterhead. "You've already prepared my resignation." The laugh that escaped me sounded brittle, sharp enough to cut. "How thoughtful." "We wanted to make this transition as smooth as possible," William said, his boardroom voice, the one he used negotiating contracts, now applied to my life. Anastasia has been very generous with the severance terms. Generous. My mentor, the woman I'd trusted with my career, had been planning my professional demise while pursuing my husband. And his family hadn't just known, they had facilitated it. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the scene, all of them, sitting around that table, with their prepared documents and practiced explanations. They looked like a board of directors conducting a hostile takeover, which, in a way, they were. Sierra, please be reasonable, Cody finally spoke, his voice careful, measured. This doesn't have to be adversarial. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd made breakfast for that morning, whose coffee I'd prepared exactly how he liked it, 1 sugar, splash of cream. He wore the silver tie I'd given him for his birthday, the one that brought out his eyes. You're right, I said, surprising them all with my sudden calm. It doesn't have to be adversarial at all. I turned and walked toward the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. By the way, Anastasia, you might want to review Section 12 of Meridian's corporate ethics policy, the part about supervisor relationships with subordinates' family members. I wrote that section myself, remember? Very thorough documentation requirements. The color drained from Anastasia's face as I opened the door. Oh, and Eleanor, cancel whatever you're planning for my birthday party next month. I'll be making my own arrangements. I left them there, in that conference room, with their documents and their restructuring plans, knowing that the facade of our perfect family had just shattered beyond repair. But I also knew something they didn't. I'd been documenting irregularities in Anastasia's expense reports for weeks. I'd noticed the pattern of Cody's supposed client meetings aligning with her schedule. And the senior compliance director at Meridian Enterprises had access to every financial record, every email, every corporate credit card transaction that would tell the real story of their betrayal. The elevator ride down felt different this time. 32 floors to plan my next move. 32 floors to transform from victim to architect of my own revenge. When it reached the ground floor, I walked through the marble lobby on legs that still felt disconnected from my body. The security guard nodded at me, the same way he had every evening for 5 years, unaware that my entire world had just imploded 32 floors above. Outside, Manhattan rushed past in its usual chaos, but I stood on the sidewalk, unable to remember where I'd parked my car that morning. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my assistant, had sent 3 messages while I was in that room. *, need to speak with you urgently. Off the record. Can we meet at the coffee shop on 47th? Marcus never asked for off-site meetings. In 3 years, our conversations had been confined to my office or quick exchanges by the printer. I found my car somehow and drove to the coffee shop, my hands steady on the wheel, even as my mind replayed Cody's fingers on Anastasia's shoulder. Marcus was already there, hunched over a laptop in the corner booth, his usual crisp appearance slightly rumpled. He looked up when I slid into the seat across from him, and something in his expression made my chest tighten. I've been debating whether to show you this for 2 weeks, he said, without preamble, turning his laptop screen toward me. But after seeing you come down from Anastasia's office looking like that, I can't keep quiet anymore. The screen showed Anastasia's calendar. Marcus, having executive access for scheduling, had highlighted dozens of blocks over the past 3 months. Portfolio review, private, appeared again and again. Always during times I was traveling for audits or compliance reviews. There's never any client name attached, Marcus said quietly. No dial-in information, no meeting room booked. And look at the pattern. He scrolled through the weeks, and I saw it clearly. Every single portfolio review aligned with my out-of-office schedule. How long has this been happening? My voice sounded surprisingly normal. The first one I noticed was in September, he said. The weekend you went to Boston for the regulatory conference. Marcus pulled up another screen. Corporate credit card records. Anastasia expensed a dinner for 2 at Daniel that Saturday. Listed as client development, but no client name recorded. September. 3 months ago. The same time Cody had started locking his laptop, taking calls in his study with the door closed, showering before breakfast instead of after. There's more, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. Your husband's investment firm started getting referrals from Meridian around the same time. High-value clients that usually would go to our preferred partners. I stared at the screen, watching the evidence of my life's dissolution laid out in calendar entries and expense reports. Why are you showing me this, Marcus? You're taking a huge risk. He closed the laptop and met my eyes. Because you're the only executive at Meridian who's ever treated me like a human being instead of furniture. And because what they're doing isn't just wrong, it's illegal. Steering clients to benefit a personal relationship? That's a violation of about 12 different regulations you taught me to watch for. My phone rang before I could respond. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again immediately. Then again. I should take this, I said, though the last thing I wanted was to hear my mother-in-law's voice. Sierra, darling, Eleanor chirped when I answered, her tone bright and artificial. I've been trying to reach you. Are you coming to dinner on Sunday? I need to know for the catering. Catering? Since when do you cater Sunday dinner? Oh, didn't Cody mention? We're having a few extra guests. Some potential business partners William wants to impress. She paused. You're not traveling this weekend, are you? I know you have that Miami conference coming up. The Miami conference wasn't for 2 weeks, and I hadn't told anyone except my team about it yet. How did you know about Miami, Eleanor? Oh, I must have heard Cody mention it. You know how proud he is of your career advancement? Speaking of which, are you working late tomorrow? I was thinking of dropping by the city. Thought we could have lunch if you're free. 3 calls in 1 week, all asking about my schedule. My mother-in-law, who usually communicated through Cody or holiday cards, suddenly desperate to know my every movement. I'll let you know about Sunday, I said, and ended the call. Marcus was watching me with concern. You okay? My mother-in-law has called 3 times this week, asking about my schedule. She's never done that before. I looked at the calendar entries again. Marcus, can you check if there were any family names on Anastasia's calendar during those block times? His fingers flew over the keyboard. I can't see meeting details, but... He pulled up the visitor log from building security. This is interesting. Cody Hawthorne signed in as Anastasia's guest 4 times in the past month. Always during your travel dates. 4 times. My husband had visited my boss while I was out of town, and no one had thought to mention it. Not Cody, not Anastasia, not even Patricia, who worked 2 floors down and must have seen him in the building. 2 weeks later was Meridian's annual fundraiser for childhood literacy, the charity gala. It was essentially mandatory for senior staff. Except that year, I was in Philadelphia dealing with an emergency audit that had mysteriously become critical just 3 days before the event. You have to go, Sierra, Anastasia had insisted when the audit came up. You're the only one I trust to handle the Fitzgerald account properly. I'll make your excuses at the gala. I'd spent that entire weekend in a sterile Philadelphia hotel room, reviewing documents that could have waited another week, missing the gala where, apparently, my husband had served as my boss's date. The photos on the company Instagram told the story I hadn't been meant to see: Cody in his tuxedo, standing next to Anastasia in a stunning gold gown, his hand on the small of her back as they posed with clients. The caption read, "Meridian Enterprises appreciates the support of our extended family." Extended family. The phrase made me nauseous now. My colleague Bethany had mentioned it casually the following Monday. Your husband is so charming. He had everyone laughing at Anastasia's table. Such a natural networker. Anastasia's table. Not the general reception, not mingling with various groups, but seated at her table for the entire evening. An honor usually reserved for major clients or board members, not employees' spouses. The final piece of the puzzle came 3 weeks before my 39th birthday, at Rachel's wedding. She was William's niece, a sweet girl who'd just finished her residency. The reception was at the Rainbow Room, all Manhattan skyline and champagne fountains. I was standing on the terrace, enjoying a moment of quiet, when James found me. Cody's younger brother had always been the weak link in the Hawthorne family armor, too sensitive for their strategic approach to relationships. He was swaying slightly, clutching a champagne flute like a lifeline. Sierra, he said, his voice thick with alcohol and something else. You're too good for all of this. For what they're doing. What? Who's doing, James? He looked around nervously, then leaned closer. The family. They've been handling things. Managing the situation. But you deserve to know that. Patricia appeared as if conjured, her smile sharp as glass. Mom's looking for you. Something about the toast. She grabbed his arm, but James resisted. She should know, Pat. It's been months. The whole family knows. And we're all just pretending. James is overwhelmed, Patricia said to me, her fingers digging into her brother's arm. Wedding emotions and too much champagne. You know how he gets. She dragged him away before he could finish, but his words echoed in my mind. The whole family knows. James's drunken words haunted me as I drove home from Rachel's wedding, the Manhattan skyline blurring through tears I refused to let fall. In my rearview mirror, I could still see the Rainbow Room's lights, where inside, my husband's family continued celebrating, having successfully silenced another almost confession from their weakest link. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at our kitchen table, staring at my laptop. James's words mixed with Marcus's calendar evidence and Eleanor's suspicious phone calls. The pattern was there, begging to be seen. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof that would hold up not just in my heart, but in any courtroom where this might end. My college roommate, Beth, had survived her own corporate nightmare 2 years ago when her business partner embezzled funds while having an affair with her husband. She'd mentioned a forensic accountant who'd saved her from complete financial ruin. I found her text with the contact information. Linda Garrison, Discreet Financial Investigations. Linda answered on the second ring, even though it was past midnight. Beth told me you might call, she said simply. Can you meet tomorrow? Bring every financial document you can access. Tax returns, bank statements, investment portfolios, corporate filings. Everything. We met at her office in Queens, a nondescript building that could have housed anything from a dental practice to an insurance agency. Linda was not what I expected. Mid-50s, wearing jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt, looking more like someone's favorite aunt than a financial detective who'd exposed multi-million-dollar frauds. Tell me what you know, she said, pushing a cup of coffee across her desk. I laid it all out. The calendar patterns, the family's strange behavior, Cody's sudden interest in Meridian events, James's drunken confession. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly just listening. And you have access to Meridian's financial systems, she asked when I finished. I'm Senior Compliance Director, I said. I have access to everything except executive compensation details. Linda smiled for the first time. That's more than enough. Here's what we're going to look for. Unusual patterns in client referrals, contracts that don't follow standard approval processes, investment opportunities that should have gone through competitive bidding but didn't. She was right. Over the next 3 days, working after hours when the Meridian offices were empty, I pulled records that painted a devastating picture. 6 months ago, right around the time those mysterious calendar blocks started appearing, Anastasia had begun steering investment opportunities to smaller firms rather than our usual institutional partners. The firm receiving the lion's share of these opportunities? Hawthorne Global Investments, the family business Cody had joined 2 years ago. The numbers were staggering. Premium municipal bonds that should have gone to our top-tier clients, private equity opportunities with guaranteed returns, pre-IPO stock allocations that investment firms would kill for, all quietly directed to the struggling Hawthorne import business that had mysteriously pivoted to investment management just as Anastasia and Cody grew closer. $2 million in directed business over 6 months, Linda said when I showed her the documentation. That's not an affair. That's a financial conspiracy. Your husband's family didn't just know about the relationship. They were profiting from it. The evidence grew more damning as we dug deeper. William's signature on contracts he had no business seeing. Eleanor listed as a consultant on deals despite having no financial credentials. Patricia's design firm suddenly receiving Meridian's marketing contracts at rates 30% above market value. I stayed up until 2 a.m. that night in my home office, mapping everything on the whiteboard I usually used for compliance workflows. Red lines connected dates. Blue circles marked financial transactions. Green highlights showed every family dinner where my schedule had been discussed. The pattern that emerged looked less like an affair and more like a coordinated corporate raid. Sunday dinner 3 weeks before my discovery, Eleanor asking about my Boston trip. Monday, Anastasia scheduling a portfolio review during those exact dates. Tuesday, $1 million municipal bond allocation to Hawthorne Global. Wednesday, Cody bringing home flowers, the guilty gesture I'd attributed to work stress. The corporate credit card discovery came by accident. I was reviewing routine expense reports for quarterly filing, the kind of mindless work I did while listening to podcasts, when Cody's name appeared on an authorized user list, not for his own firm's cards, but for Meridian Enterprises. Card number ending in 4421. Anastasia's executive account. My hands shook as I pulled the detailed statements. The St. Regis Hotel, multiple charges on dates I'd been in Seattle for compliance training. Daniel, Le Bernardine, 11 Madison Park, intimate dinners for 2 during my Philadelphia audit. The Hamptons rental, labeled as Client Entertainment Weekend, coinciding with my mother's birthday visit to California. But the worst was finding charges at Cartier the day after my promotion was announced. A $15,000 charge for what the receipt described as estate jewelry consultation. The same day Cody had said he was proud of me, held me close, and promised we'd celebrate properly when things calmed down at his firm. I was printing these documents when Patricia appeared in my office doorway. It was 7 p.m. The Meridian building was mostly empty except for a few junior analysts working on deadline. She looked haggard, her designer suit wrinkled, her usually perfect makeup streaked. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. I kept printing, the mechanical sound filling the silence between us. Patricia sat in my guest chair, clutching her purse like armor. "I know you know," she said finally. "James told me about the wedding, about what he almost said." I turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral despite the rage building in my chest. "What exactly do I know, Patricia?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the ceiling as if seeking divine intervention. "The family, we've been trying to protect you from unnecessary pain. Sometimes these things work themselves out if given space and time." "Space and time," I repeated. "Is that what you call facilitating secret meetings between my husband and my boss?" Patricia's face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. At first, it was just business. Anastasia could help our family's firm, and Cody was the natural liaison. But then, she twisted her purse strap. Mom and Dad saw an opportunity. They said if Cody was happy and the business was thriving, everyone would benefit eventually. Everyone except me. They said you were too focused on your career to notice. That you and Cody had grown apart naturally. That this was just evolution." The word made me sick. Evolution. As if betrayal were some natural process, inevitable as erosion or continental drift. Patricia stood abruptly. "I shouldn't have come. I just wanted you to know that not everyone agreed with it. James and I, we tried to tell them it was wrong, but the money, Sierra. The family business was failing. Dad was going to lose everything." She left before I could respond, her confession hanging in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning for months, while I slept peacefully in the same house, ate at the same table, loved the same people who were orchestrating my destruction. I stood in my empty office, Patricia's confession still echoing. The family business was failing. They had traded my marriage for financial survival. The printer continued its mechanical rhythm, spitting out page after page of evidence that would either destroy them or destroy me. There was no middle ground left. That night, I went home and cooked dinner as if nothing had changed. Cody sat across from me at our dining table, cutting his steak with the same precise movements he used for everything, unaware that I had started recording our conversations on my phone, tucked beneath my napkin. "How was your day?" he asked, the question as empty as our marriage had become. "Busy. The quarterly compliance reports are due soon." I watched him, absently scrolling through his phone. Eleanor called again today. She seems very interested in my schedule lately. His fingers paused for just a moment on the screen. She's probably planning something for your birthday. You know how she gets about family celebrations. Family celebrations. I wanted to laugh at the irony, but instead I said, she asked specifically about the Miami conference. I haven't told her about it yet. Maybe I mentioned it, he said, still not looking up. Can you pass the salt? For the next 3 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. Every evening after Cody went to bed, I worked in the darkness of our guest room, photographing documents by phone light, uploading files to encrypted drives that I had Marie, my friend from college, store in her apartment in Queens. She didn't ask questions when I showed up at midnight with USB drives wrapped in plastic bags. Just made me tea and promised to keep them safe. The family dinners became intelligence gathering operations. I arrived early to help Eleanor in the kitchen, my phone recording in my jacket pocket as she chatted about Cody's promising new clients and how Anastasia had been so generous with referrals. Such a brilliant woman, Eleanor said one Sunday, arranging roses in her Waterford vase. She really understands the value of strategic partnerships. Not everyone has that vision. Strategic partnerships, I repeated, slicing tomatoes with unnecessary force. Is that what we're calling it? Eleanor's hand stilled on the flowers. I'm not sure what you mean, dear. Nothing, I said, smiling. Just thinking about work. William was less subtle. During dinner, he leaned back in his chair, bourbon in hand, and pontificate about the changing landscape of investment management. Relationships are everything in this business, he'd say, looking directly at Cody. Sometimes you have to make unconventional alliances to survive. I recorded it all. Every knowing look, every coded reference, every moment they thought they were being clever while I played the oblivious wife focused on her career. The breakthrough came during a routine system update at Meridian. As Senior Compliance Director, I had to review all expense categorizations for the quarter, a mind-numbing task that involved cross-referencing thousands of transactions. But buried in the client development budget, I found Anastasia's weakness, hubris. She had been billing everything to the company. The Valentino dress she wore to the charity gala? Client relationship building. The couple's massage at the Mandarin Oriental? Executive stress management. The private jet to Martha's Vineyard? Strategic planning retreat. Each receipt, each transaction, bore 2 signatures, Anastasia Blackwood and Cody Hawthorne. My husband had been signing off on luxury purchases for another woman, authorizing expenses that violated every policy I had written for Meridian. The paper trail was so brazen, so carelessly arrogant, that it took my breath away. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been documenting it in corporate financial records. I photographed everything, backed it up in 3 different locations, and sent encrypted copies to Linda Garrison. Her response was immediate. This is wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement. Your boss just handed you a federal case. The baby shower for William's niece, Sophia, provided the final piece I needed. It was held at the Yale Club, all pastel balloons and champagne brunches, the kind of event where Hawthorne women performed their social duties with practiced grace. I arrived late, claiming work delays, my phone already recording in my purse. Eleanor pulled me aside near the gift table, her Chanel perfume overwhelming in the small space. You look tired, dear. All this work can't be good for you. It's just a demanding time, I said, letting exhaustion creep into my voice. Sometimes I wonder if I'm missing out on other things by focusing so much on my career. Eleanor's eyes lit up with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for an opening. A career is important, but it shouldn't be everything. Sometimes we need to accept that people grow in different directions. Cody, for instance, has been exploring new horizons lately. It's healthy for a marriage when both partners have room to explore their options. Explore their options? I kept my voice carefully neutral. Oh, you know what I mean. Professional development, new connections. Anastasia has been wonderful for his career growth. You should be proud that he's expanding his network. And you think I should focus on my career while Cody explores? Exactly. Eleanor squeezed my arm, mistaking my tone for acceptance. You're such a smart girl, Sierra. Focus on what you do best and let Cody do the same. Everyone ends up happier that way. Her words, captured clearly on my phone, were the confession I needed. Not just knowledge of the affair, but active encouragement, strategic planning, family collusion in my humiliation. That night, I locked myself in our bedroom while Cody attended another late client meeting that we both knew wasn't about clients. I spread everything across the bed, printed emails, photographed receipts, transcribed recordings, Linda's financial analysis, Marcus's calendar evidence. It looked like the war room of a prosecutor preparing for the trial of the century. I worked until dawn, organizing everything into a single, comprehensive report. Each section meticulously documented with dates, times, and evidence. The financial fraud alone totaled over $300,000 in misappropriated funds. The conflicts of interest violated dozens of SEC regulations. The paper trail led directly from Anastasia's executive suite to the Hawthorne family bank accounts. But the most damning section was the timeline, 6 months of deception, laid out hour by hour, dinner by dinner, lie by lie. Every time Cody kissed me goodbye while planning to meet Anastasia. Every family gathering where they discussed my schedule to facilitate their encounters. Every moment they smiled at me while counting the money flowing from my boss to their accounts. As the sun rose over Brooklyn, I looked at the man sleeping in our bed, his face peaceful in the morning light. He had no idea that I had built a case that would destroy everything he knew. The woman he had married, the one who trusted blindly and loved completely, was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that love without respect was worthless, and that the best revenge wasn't emotional. It was procedural, systematic, and absolutely devastating. I closed my laptop, the comprehensive report glowing on the screen. My husband still slept peacefully beside me as the morning sun painted our bedroom walls gold. The evidence was complete, undeniable, and devastating. Now, I needed to decide how to deploy it. The answer came 3 days later in the form of Eleanor's phone call. "Sierra, darling, your birthday is coming up next month," she said, her voice carrying an unusual brightness that immediately put me on alert. "William and I want to host a party for you at our townhouse. It's such a milestone birthday, 39 deserves proper celebration." Eleanor had never once offered to host my birthday in 12 years of marriage. My birthdays had always been quiet dinners with Cody, sometimes a weekend trip. The sudden enthusiasm felt orchestrated, like everything else the Hawthorne family had been planning behind my back. "That's very generous, Eleanor," I said. But she interrupted, her tone shifting from suggestion to command. "I've already started making arrangements. Saturday the 15th, cocktails at 7 o'clock, dinner at 8. I thought we'd keep it intimate. Family and close friends. Who did you have in mind for the guest list?" There was a pause, the kind that preceded carefully rehearsed words. "Well, family, of course. Some of William's business associates. And I thought it would be appropriate to invite Anastasia Blackwood, given your professional relationship. It would be a nice gesture, don't you think? Show that there are no boundaries between work and family life." No boundaries, the phrase hung between us like a confession she didn't realize she'd made. I gripped my phone tighter, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Of course. Anastasia should definitely be there." "Wonderful. I'll handle everything. You just show up looking beautiful." After ending the call, I sat at my desk and mapped out exactly what Eleanor was planning. A controlled environment where they could manage the narrative. Probably planning to announce Cody and Anastasia's relationship as if it were a mutual decision we'd all reached together. They would frame it as sophisticated, modern, evolved, all the words they'd been rehearsing in their family conferences while plotting my humiliation. The timing was perfect, but not for the reason they thought. I spent the next week making my own preparations. First, I visited the offices of the Securities and Exchange Commission in Lower Manhattan. The building's austere lobby and security checkpoints felt appropriate for what I was about to do. The investigator who took my report, a woman named Janet Chin, with kind eyes and an uncompromising demeanor, reviewed my documentation with increasing interest. "This is extensive," she said, flipping through the evidence of financial fraud. "How long have you been compiling this?" 3 weeks of active documentation, but the crime spans 6 months. She looked up sharply at the word crimes. "You understand that filing a formal complaint triggers an investigation that can't be stopped once it starts?" "I understand completely." 2 days before the party, I hand-delivered copies of everything to 3 different destinations. The SEC received the complete financial fraud documentation. Meridian's board of directors received a package by a certified mail detailing their CEO's misuse of corporate resources and breach of fiduciary duty. The state attorney general's office received evidence of the broader conspiracy involving contract manipulation and commercial bribery. Each package was timed to arrive Monday morning, 48 hours after my birthday party. I wanted the Hawthorns to enjoy their last weekend of thinking they'd won before their world imploded with the force of a federal investigation. The envelope I prepared for the party itself was a masterpiece of condensed destruction. Into a single manila envelope, I placed the most damning pieces of evidence: photographs of Cody's signatures on Anastasia's personal expenses, screenshots of text messages between him and Anastasia discussing the family's financial benefits from their relationship, Eleanor's recorded admission that she wanted me to focus on my career while Cody explored options, and copies of the filed reports with their official timestamps visible. I sealed it with the same methodical care I used when preparing compliance violations that would end careers and trigger criminal investigations. This envelope would be my birthday gift to myself. The moment when I stopped being their victim and became the architect of their downfall. Marie agreed to attend the party without hesitation when I explained what I needed. We met at a coffee shop in Queens, far from any chance encounters with the Hawthorne Circle. "You want me to record whatever happens?" she asked, stirring sugar into her latte. "They're planning something. I can feel it. They want to use my birthday party to force me to accept the situation publicly, probably with all their society friends as witnesses." Marie's expression hardened. She had been there for my wedding, had seen me build my life with Cody, had watched me try to balance my career with being the perfect Hawthorne wife. Where should I position myself? Eleanor always makes speeches from the fireplace in their living room. You can get a clear angle from near the bar. You'll capture everything. Use your phone, but be discreet. I want documentation of whatever they've planned. And I want multiple angles of their reactions when I give them my response. You're going to confront them. I'm going to give them exactly what they think they want. A mature, sophisticated response to their betrayal. They just won't realize until it's too late that my definition of maturity includes accountability. The Thursday before the party, I visited my lawyer to ensure all my personal finances were protected. I opened new bank accounts in my name only, moved my retirement funds, and documented the current value of all marital assets. Cody wanted a divorce. After what was coming, I would be ready. That evening, I found Cody in his study, the door unusually open. He looked up when I entered, something flickering across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or anticipation of the elaborate charade his family had planned for Saturday. Your mother called about the party, I said, leaning against the doorframe. It's very thoughtful of her to host. She wants to do something special for you, he replied, his voice carefully neutral. You only turned 39 once. True. And she mentioned Anastasia will be there. Cody's fingers stilled on his keyboard. Is that a problem? Why would it be a problem? She's my boss. We work together every day. He studied my face, searching for something: suspicion, anger, knowledge. But I'd learned to wear the same mask they'd all been wearing for months. The one that said everything was fine while kingdoms burned behind our eyes. You're right, he said finally. It's good to maintain those relationships. Relationships, everything in the Hawthorne world came down to relationships, connections, networks. They had built their entire conspiracy on the assumption that relationships mattered more than truth. That connections trumped integrity, that networks could survive any revelation if properly managed. Saturday would teach them otherwise. Saturday would show them that some betrayals couldn't be managed, negotiated, or restructured. Some betrayals demanded the kind of justice that came with federal investigations and public disgrace. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp March weather that made Manhattan look like a movie set. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the black cocktail dress I'd chosen specifically for this evening. Elegant enough for Eleanor's standards, dark enough for a funeral, which, in a way, this was. The death of illusions, of family bonds, of the life we'd all pretended to live. Cody emerged from the bathroom, his cologne filling the room with the same scent he'd worn to our wedding. You look beautiful, he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. For a moment, something flickered across his face, regret, perhaps, or maybe just anticipation of the performance his family had orchestrated. Thank you, I replied, slipping the manila envelope into my purse. Your mother will appreciate that we're making an effort. The drive to the townhouse felt longer than usual. Cody kept checking his phone at red lights, his thumb moving across the screen in quick, nervous gestures. I watched the city pass by, counting the minutes until everything would change. Eleanor had outdone herself with the decorations. The townhouse glowed with soft lighting, fresh flowers on every surface, and enough champagne to float a small yacht. Guests were already arriving when we walked in. William's business associates, Eleanor's book club friends, a handful of my colleagues from Meridian who looked slightly uncomfortable in the opulent setting. Sierra, darling. Eleanor swept toward me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and air kisses. Happy birthday. You look absolutely stunning. Behind her, I saw Anastasia near the bar, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She raised her champagne glass to me in a mock toast, her smile sharp as winter wind. Marie had already positioned herself exactly where we discussed, phone discreetly ready, her expression neutral as she chatted with one of William's golf buddies about market volatility. The party unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Appetizers were passed, champagne was poured, and conversations flowed around safe topics: real estate prices, vacation plans, the usual Manhattan social currency. But I could feel the undercurrent of anticipation, the way Eleanor kept checking her watch, how William and Patricia exchanged meaningful glances across the room. At exactly 8:30, Eleanor clinked her glass with a silver spoon, calling for attention. Everyone, please, a toast to our dear Sierra on her 39th birthday. The crowd gathered, glasses raised, as Eleanor delivered a speech that sounded heartfelt to anyone who didn't know better. She spoke about family, about growth, about embracing change and new chapters. Every word was loaded with double meaning, a message wrapped in birthday wishes. To Sierra, she concluded, may this year bring you clarity, acceptance, and the wisdom to recognize happiness in all its forms. The guests applauded and drank. That's when Eleanor touched my elbow gently. Sierra, dear, could you join us in the library for a moment? William has a special gift he'd like to present privately. I followed her down the hallway, hearing Cody's footsteps behind us. The library door was already open. William and Patricia, waiting inside like judges in a courtroom. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a trap springing shut. Sierra, William began, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used with difficult clients. We wanted to speak with you privately because we care about you. We're family, and family looks out for each other. I remained standing while they arranged themselves in a semicircle, clearly following some rehearsed positioning. Patricia fidgeted with her bracelet, the only one showing any discomfort with what was about to happen. Eleanor took over, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. We know this might be difficult to hear, but we believe you're mature enough to handle the truth. Cody and Anastasia have developed feelings for each other. Real, profound feelings that transcend conventional relationships. Transcend. I repeated, tasting the word like spoiled wine. They're soulmates, Eleanor continued, warming to her theme. You can't fight that kind of connection. It would be selfish to try. William nodded sagely. You're an intelligent woman, Sierra. Surely you understand that forcing people to deny their true feelings only creates misery for everyone involved. Patricia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You're strong enough to handle this with dignity. We all know how capable you are. I let them finish their entire presentation, their carefully rehearsed arguments about emotional evolution and mature acceptance. They spoke about Cody's happiness as if it were a commodity more valuable than my dignity. They framed Anastasia's pursuit of my husband as some cosmic inevitability rather than calculated predation. When they finally fell silent, waiting for my response, I smiled. It was the same smile I used when reviewing contracts that contained hidden termination clauses. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. I should handle this with maturity and grace. Eleanor's face lit up with relief. William actually sighed. Patricia's shoulders dropped as tension left her body. They thought they'd won. They thought their careful manipulation had worked. Shall we return to the party? Eleanor suggested, already moving toward the door. No need to let this spoil your birthday celebration. I followed them back to the main room, where guests continued their conversations, oblivious to the family tribunal that had just convened. Cody stood near the fireplace with Anastasia, their bodies angled toward each other with the unconscious intimacy of lovers who think they're being discreet. I walked directly toward them, my heels clicking on the marble floor with metronomic precision. The envelope in my purse felt warm against my side. Conversations near us began to quiet as people sensed something shifting in the room's atmosphere. Cody, Anastasia, I said, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. Since we're all being mature adults here, I have something for you both. I pulled out the envelope, holding it between us like a verdict. Cody's face went pale before he even opened it. Perhaps he recognized the weight of it, the way truly devastating documents always feel heavier than they should. Sierra, what is this? Anastasia's voice carried a warning. But it was too late. Open it, I said simply. After all, we're handling this like sophisticated people, aren't we? Cody's fingers fumbled with the seal. I watched his eyes scan the first page, the SEC filing stamp visible at the top, the case number already assigned. His hands began to shake as he reached the second page, the documented fraud, the signatures he'd placed on Anastasia's personal expenses. The sound that escaped him wasn't quite a scream. It was more primal than that, the sound of someone watching everything they'd built evaporate like morning mist. The envelope fell from his hands, pages scattering across the marble floor where guests could see the official headers. The word fraud was visible in bold letters, the family business name listed as a co-conspirator in financial crimes. Sierra, please, you don't understand. His voice cracked, reaching for me with hands that had signed away our marriage for money he'd never legally earned. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice carrying across the now silent room. My husband's family has known about his affair with my boss for months. They facilitated it because Anastasia was steering illegal profits to their struggling business. Every person in that library just tried to convince me to accept this quietly. The room remained frozen as the documents lay scattered across Eleanor's imported Italian marble floor. Guests stood like statues, champagne flutes suspended midway to lips, watching the Hawthorne family's carefully constructed world shatter in real time. Marie, from her position by the bar, had captured everything on her phone, the confrontation, the scattered papers, and now the stunned silence that followed my announcement. Eleanor was the first to move, her face cycling through emotions like a malfunctioning slideshow, confusion, rage, fear, and finally a kind of desperate calculation as she tried to find words that might salvage the situation. This is obviously a misunderstanding, she said, her voice pitched too high, addressing the room rather than me. Family matters can be so complicated. Federal fraud investigations aren't family matters, I said, bending to pick up one of the pages. This is a copy of the complaint filed with the SEC. Monday morning, investigators will begin reviewing how Anastasia Blackwood used Meridian Enterprises resources to enrich the Hawthorne family business through illegal contracts and kickbacks. Anastasia stood perfectly still, her red dress now looking like a warning flag. Her eyes met mine across the room, and I saw the exact moment she understood the scope of what I'd done. Her phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, probably her lawyer already alerting her to the freeze orders that would hit her accounts within hours. The guests began to leave, murmuring excuses about early mornings and forgotten commitments. Nobody wanted to be associated with scandal of this magnitude. William's golf buddies avoided eye contact as they shuffled past. Eleanor's book club friends whispered among themselves, already composing the gossip they'd spread through the Upper East Side by Sunday brunch. By Monday afternoon, the dominoes were falling with breathtaking speed. I sat in my home office, watching the destruction unfold through emails, news alerts, and phone calls I didn't answer. Meridian's board convened an emergency meeting at 7 a.m. By noon, Anastasia was suspended pending investigation, her company access revoked, her office sealed. The FBI had arrived at 10 a.m. with boxes and hard drives, beginning the forensic accounting that would unravel years of carefully hidden fraud. Marcus sent me a single text, *, she's gone. Federal agents are here. Board wants to see you tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. The Hawthorne family business hemorrhaged clients like a severed artery. 3 major contracts were terminated within 24 hours as partners scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. William's phone rang constantly. I could hear it from the street when I drove past their townhouse, but nobody was calling with good news. Tuesday evening, Cody came home to pack. I heard his key in the lock and stayed in the kitchen, giving him space to gather his things, but he found me anyway, standing in our bedroom doorway with red-rimmed eyes and 3 days of stubble. "Can we talk?" His voice was hoarse, broken. I turned from the window where I'd been watching Brooklyn wake up from another sleepless night. "There's nothing to discuss. Your lawyer can contact mine." He stepped into the room, and suddenly the space felt too small. "Sierra, please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you signed off on Anastasia's personal expenses. How your family orchestrated this whole thing. How you all sat around planning my humiliation while eating dinners I cooked." He dropped to his knees beside our bed, the bed where we'd spent 12 years together, where we talked about children we'd never have, where I'd held him after his grandmother's funeral. "I never meant for it to go this far," he sobbed, his body shaking. "It started as business. Dad's company was failing. Anastasia offered to help. And then it became something else. It became fraud. It became conspiracy. It became betrayal on a scale I couldn't have imagined. My family pushed me toward her," he pleaded. "They said it was for everyone's benefit, that you were too focused on your career to notice or care. They made it seem like I was doing the right thing for everyone." His words might have moved me 6 months ago, back when I still believed in the man I'd married. Now they sounded like what they were: desperate attempts to shift blame, to minimize accountability, to transform himself from perpetrator to victim. "Your family didn't forge your signature on those documents," I said quietly. "They didn't force you to meet Anastasia at the St. Regis while I was traveling. You made those choices." "I still love you," he whispered, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. "No, you don't. You love the life I provided, the stability, the respectability, the cover for your family schemes. But love? Love doesn't conspire. Love doesn't deceive. Love doesn't treat someone's dignity as acceptable collateral damage." Wednesday brought the divorce papers. My lawyer, recommended by Linda Garrison, was a specialist in high-asset divorces involving financial crimes. She presented Cody with terms that were non-negotiable. He would forfeit any claim to the brownstone, our joint investments, even the car. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue additional criminal charges for the fraudulent tax returns we'd filed jointly while he was hiding illegal income. His attorney, looking exhausted from 3 days of damage control, advised him to sign. "The criminal prosecution is going to be bad enough," I heard him say in the hallway. "Don't add a vindictive divorce trial to your problems." Cody signed with hands that shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. The man who'd once confidently signed million-dollar investment deals was reduced to a trembling mess, watching 12 years dissolve in black ink. Thursday afternoon, Patricia appeared at my door. She looked destroyed, designer clothes wrinkled, makeup streaked down her cheeks. Her usual composure completely shattered. I almost didn't let her in, but something in her expression made me open the door wider. "I need to tell you everything," she said, collapsing onto my couch. "Not for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But you should know the whole truth." She talked for an hour while my security system recorded every word. How the conspiracy had started 8 months ago when William confessed the family business was failing. How Eleanor had suggested Cody leverage his relationship with me to get closer to Anastasia. How they'd coached him through the initial approach, telling him it was just networking, just business development. "We all knew from the beginning," Patricia sobbed. "Every Sunday dinner, we'd discuss your schedule, plan their meetings, strategize about how to keep you from finding out. Mom would say you were too smart to be fooled forever, but by then the money would be secured and you'd have to accept it." "You thought I was naive," I said. "We thought you were too focused on being perfect, the perfect wife, the perfect employee, to see what was happening. We didn't count on you being." She searched for the word. "Systematic. Thorough. We didn't know you were documenting everything." She left as the sun set, her confession recorded and saved in 3 different locations. The evidence was now complete. Not just financial fraud, but conspiracy, premeditation, and systematic deception involving every member of the Hawthorne family. By Friday, Eleanor's calls had shifted from angry demands for explanation to desperate pleas for mercy. She left voicemails that cycled through the entire spectrum of manipulation: guilt, rage, bargaining, appeals to family loyalty. "You're destroying us," she wept in one message. "William's having chest pains. The business is ruined. How can you do this to family?" Family, the word had lost all meaning. Family was supposed to protect you, not orchestrate your betrayal. Family was supposed to celebrate your successes, not use them as opportunities for exploitation. Family was supposed to love you, not trade your dignity for financial gain. I deleted every message without listening to the end. The Hawthorns had made their choices months ago when they decided my marriage was an acceptable sacrifice for their financial survival. I sat in my empty brownstone that Friday night, Eleanor's desperate voicemails finally deleted. The silence felt like the first clean breath after swimming up from deep water. The house felt different now. Not lonely, but spacious. Not abandoned, but liberated. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the expensive bottles Cody had collected to impress his colleagues, but a simple Malbec I actually enjoyed, and started planning what came next. 6 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, depositions, and rebuilding. The investigation into Meridian Enterprises expanded beyond Anastasia to encompass the entire executive team. The board, desperate to salvage the company's reputation, offered me a generous settlement to avoid a wrongful termination lawsuit. They knew I had grounds, given how Anastasia had orchestrated everything. I took the money, signed the non-disclosure agreement that specifically excluded the criminal proceedings, and walked away from corporate life with enough capital to start over on my own terms. The office space I found in Queens was nothing like Meridian's glass towers. It was a converted corner unit in a building that housed a bakery, a tax preparation service, and a family law practice. The morning light streamed through windows that actually opened, and the super, Mr. Rodriguez, brought me homemade empanadas on my first day. The rent was reasonable. The neighborhood felt real, and nobody knew about the Hawthorne scandal or cared about my former life in Manhattan's financial district. Garrison Compliance Consulting officially opened on a Tuesday in September. Linda, the forensic accountant who had helped me uncover everything, sent me my first client, a small import business whose owner worried about internal fraud. Within a week, I'd identified 3 areas of vulnerability and helped them implement controls that would protect them from the kind of exploitation the Hawthorns had perpetrated. That client referred me to her sister, who ran a medical practice. The sister referred me to a colleague with a growing tech startup. By month's end, I had 6 clients who valued my expertise not because of my corporate pedigree, but because I helped them protect their businesses from predators who viewed small companies as easy targets. My work had purpose now, in a way it never had at Meridian. These weren't billionaires shuffling assets to avoid taxes. These were people who'd built something real with their own hands and needed someone to help them protect it. A florist who'd been overcharged by her payment processor for years. A restaurant owner whose manager was skimming from the till. A nonprofit director who discovered her board treasurer had been steering contracts to his wife's company. Each case reminded me that financial crimes weren't just about numbers. They were about trust betrayed, about people who thought relationships meant more than money, discovering how wrong they were. October brought news through the legal grapevine that the Hawthorne estate was for sale. I drove out to Long Island on a Sunday, parking across from the Colonial that had hosted so many family dinners where my destruction was planned between courses. The realtor signs swayed in the autumn wind, and through the windows I could see the rooms were already empty. Eleanor's prized chandelier was gone. William's library, where they'd collected first editions they never read, stood bare. A neighbor walking her dog recognized me and stopped to chat. Such a shame about the Hawthorns, she said, though her tone suggested she was enjoying the gossip. They had to sell everything though. House, the cars, even Eleanor's jewelry collection. The legal fees, and William's health hasn't been good since the stress of it all. I made appropriate sympathetic noises, but felt nothing. They had chosen this path. Every time they facilitated a secret meeting. Every time they discussed my schedule to create opportunities for betrayal. Every time they looked me in the eye while knowing what they were stealing from me. The criminal trials began in January. Anastasia plea bargained down to 2 years minimum security and 5 years probation in exchange for testifying about the broader corruption at Meridian. The Hawthorne family business dissolved entirely, its assets liquidated to pay fines and settlements. Cody avoided prison, barely, but received 3 years probation and was permanently barred from working in financial services. His mugshot appeared in the business section of the Times, his face gaunt and hollow, nothing like the confident man who'd once stood beside me at our wedding. William suffered a mild heart attack during the proceedings and required constant care that depleted whatever savings they'd hidden from investigators. Eleanor, who'd spent decades cultivating her position in society, found herself uninvited from charity boards and social clubs. Patricia moved to Seattle, changing her last name and starting over where nobody knew about the scandal. My 40th birthday arrived in March, exactly 1 year after the party that destroyed the Hawthorne dynasty. Marie insisted on hosting a dinner at her apartment. Nothing fancy, just friends who'd known me before I'd become Mrs. Hawthorne, before Meridian, before any of it mattered. We sat around her kitchen table eating Chinese takeout from containers, drinking wine that cost $12 a bottle, playing cards until midnight. Nobody mentioned Cody or the scandal. We talked about normal things, Marie's promotion at the hospital, our friend Beth's new baby, the book club selection nobody had actually finished reading. "You seem good," Marie said as she walked me to the door at evening's end. "Really good. Not just surviving, but actually good." She was right. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I felt aligned with my own life. No performance, no managing appearances, no strategic relationships that required constant maintenance and calculation. A week later, I stood on my brownstone steps, coffee in hand, watching Brooklyn wake up to a perfect spring morning. The cherry trees were blooming along the street, and families were beginning their Sunday routines. A young couple walked past with their baby in a stroller, and I thought about the children Cody and I had never had. A blessing now, though it hadn't felt that way at the time. My phone buzzed with a text from a new client, a small investment firm that wanted help establishing compliance protocols that would protect them from both internal fraud and predatory partners. It was exactly the kind of work that mattered, helping businesses protect themselves from people like Anastasia and the Hawthorns. The truth I'd learned wasn't about revenge or justice or even survival. It was simpler than that. When someone shows you through their actions that your dignity is an acceptable casualty for their gain, believe them. Document everything. Report it to the proper authorities. And then build something better from whatever remains. The Hawthorns thought they were conducting a sophisticated financial operation, that their conspiracy was about money and connections and strategic advantages. They never understood that what they were really doing was teaching me my own worth. Not in dollars or social standing, but in the simple ability to recognize deception, document truth, and refuse to be complicit in my own destruction. Standing there in the spring morning, I realized I'd won something more valuable than any settlement or verdict. I'd won the right to live without pretense, to work without compromise, and to trust without fear. The Hawthorns had lost everything trying to take what wasn't theirs. I'd gained everything by simply refusing to let them.